Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership and for Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership. And today is the part 2 episode of how to create a profitable business exit with my special guest, Mr. Antonio Colon, who is an amazing entrepreneur, innovator, and experienced business executive who has successfully exited several high-end entrepreneurial businesses and now consults with other executives about how to plan and realize their profitable business exits. The part 1 episode, which is episode number 497, aired on the 8th of October, 2024. Be sure to go back to listen to part 1 of this important topic about exits, mergers, and acquisitions. Mr. Antonio Colon, also known as Tony, served his country for 20 years in the U.S. Air Force, first as a jet engine mechanic and then as an astronautical engineer. His Air Force roles were space-related, such as the Star Wars program, and included significant work with satellite communications and software, all commensurate with his degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Mississippi. Mr. Colon also started and sold 3 significant businesses. First, he founded Martinelli Realty Incorporated, focused on the sale of HUD and VA repossessions, property management for homes owned by relocated military personnel, and later commercial real estate sales and leasing until Mr. Colon successfully sold the company in 2000. Second, in 1998, Mr. Colon started Splat Paintball Incorporated. His engineering designs and manufacture of paintball-related equipment brought innovation to the sport nationwide and worldwide. He successfully sold the paintball business in 2006. And then third, he leveraged his experience as a service-disabled veteran and his knowledge of engineering, manufacturing, business, and the specialized effects he used in the paintball business to form Combat Training Solutions Incorporated. And that was to enhance military training and help save the lives of warfighters. Today, these battlefield special effects devices are used by the military and law enforcement agencies nationwide and in 16 foreign countries. In 2011, Mr. Colon sold CTS to Siloam Technologies, a publicly traded company based in West Springfield, Massachusetts. CTS won many awards for their life-saving designs that emulate IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Mr. Colon has also won many awards, to include the 2010 Colorado Small Business Person Award, the Military Technology Magazine's Top Innovator Award for 5 consecutive years, and the Colorado Biz Magazine's 2011 Top 50 Colorado Minority-Owned Businesses. Today, Mr. Colon is a recreational helicopter pilot, a volunteer aircraft mechanic at a local flight club, and is a 5th-degree black belt in Okinawan Goju Karate. He enjoys life with his wife, Linda, of more than 32 years, his 2 daughters, and his 3 grandsons. So, Tony, welcome back to the Voice of Leadership and to Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership.
Thank you for having me back. I really appreciate that.
I really appreciate you saying yes and that you came back, because we have a few more things to go over and to cover on this really important topic pertaining to business exits. And first, Tony, I want to just give sort of a brief overview of the territory we covered last time, just so our audience can catch up a little bit with what we did before. First of all, we talked about how important it is to begin with the end in mind. In other words, don't plan the exit at 0 hour. From the beginning of the business, start planning the exit. Number 2, we talked about plan for a timeline to have in mind. In other words, how long do you want to be in the business? What's the revenue you want to be bringing in? How do you want to retire, in essence, when you leave, to determine when you can sell it? And then thirdly, create a win-win experience from the beginning for the owner as well as for the employees. And of course, if a company has investors. You also talked about increasing the value of the business as you go along, always thinking about that valuation part that's going to come later. And early on, number five, you said get a M&A, mergers and acquisitions team on board early. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We also talked about hiring and how it's important to hire for what I'll call high value people who you're bringing in because they have some outside expertise you need and they can get the vision accomplished that you have in mind. And then there's some internal things you can do as well. And we're going to talk more about that today. We also talked about treating employees well all along the way, making sure that they have 401ks, medical benefits, and other perks, if you will, that keep them engaged in the company and what the company is doing. And we talked about how that as you're planning an exit, you want to create the deal in such a way that it's seamless for the employees. Just the ownership is changing, but in essence, they're going to be able to go to work and have essentially the same experience the next day. And then we talked about sustainability, how important it is that the business have good documentation so that the new owners will be able to follow those procedures and have the same stellar results to really have a return on their investment. And then the 10th thing I shared that we kind of talked about last time, how important it is to have focus as the owner and to participate in education and consultation so that you know what you're doing as you go along. So that's my summary of part one and what we covered last time. So, how does that sound to you, Tony?
Sounds complicated.
It sounds, well,
Well,
it is because we're talking about a rather complicated subject. And so I'm going to just jump right in where we kind of left off and just add a little more meat to some of those bones. So, Tony, I know one of the things that you shared last time,
okay.
you were talking about who should be on the M&A team. I remember you saying that certainly there should be an accountant and an attorney, possibly a bookkeeper on the team. And I want you to talk a little bit more about that. Who should be on this team? Are they in the background with the company all along, all the time, or do you bring them in at a certain point? And how is that M&A team different from the business broker team that you also talked about for maybe a smaller business that's perhaps maybe less than 5 million? So talk a little bit about that. Who's on these M&A teams?
Okay. Well, before I do that, Dr. Karen, thank you again for having me. And I think the work that you're doing is excellent and it's very necessary. And I appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Now, to get to your question, who should be on an M&A team? Well, a consultant as yourself. A consultant is important to represent the interests of the seller. Over the years, it's your business grows. Let's say you have a startup and you go into all of the things of wearing multiple hats as a startup owner and founder of a business. You become a CEO, president, and suddenly you go into phase two of your business. Phase two is a very organized way of performing the tasks that you're good at within your business, but there is some growth and some expansion that you're doing. And then you get pretty mature and you go into phase three of the business where you're going down this path that has been well identified in the prior two phases. So you're more mature and you're trying to get to that sweet spot so you can exit. So as a recap, when should you plan on your exit? The plan on the exit should start at the time you're writing your business plan. And that's one of the things that people fail to do. And the M&A team is a big deal within that business plan. And you should always have representation of a lawyer, but what kind of lawyer do you need for day-to-day activities is a different type of lawyer than you need for exiting. So a transition attorney is what you'll need. Of course, an accountant, but an accountant that is adept at valuating, is adept at calculating EBITDA And by the way, EBITDA is one of those things that many owners and many people don't know what EBITDA is. 90% of the people I come across don't know what earnings before interest, taxation, deductions, and amortization is. You need to know that because your business is going to be evaluated based on your EBITDA, your true earnings. Having an accountant that's able to track that over the years is very important for you to be able to get to that sweet spot that you want. That sweet spot, by the way, has to be identified when? Early on, where that business plan is. What should you be trying to identify? Well, the M&A team will help you with that as the years go by. If you get them early, simply by conversation, telling them, I want to do this, I want to do that. I want to end up in this kind of place at this stage in my life. Having that M&A team, that real personal relationship with that transition attorney, a very, very good relationship with a CPA that truly knows how business runs and knows how to calculate it.
Tony, I'm really glad early on you mentioned how important it is to have a consultant on the team as well in the position of doing the kind of work that I do. And what I've discovered is that a lot of times clients don't know how important it is to have the consultant on the front end. And it's been my experience that as a consultant, we're often the convener, the one who's looking at the whole picture holistically. And as you said, certainly looking out for the best interest of the owners. And so I think that that's huge.
Absolutely.
They remember to get the CPA, they remember to get the attorney. They don't always know the role of the consultant. And I think, since you were in real estate, I think that one of the ways I often think about it, if you're buying a house and the real estate agent is the one who's representing the sellers, your interest may not be fully, taken into account unless you have your own representation in the real estate deal as well. So that's how I kind of look at it.
Right, exactly. And that personal relationship with your consultant early on is essential. I get called in late in the game most of the time. And what does that do? Well, the brakes have to be put on right away, 95% of the time. Hold your horses. You're not ready to exit. You don't know what EBITDA is. You don't know your valuation. You don't even have a vision of what it is you want out of this business in order to exit it. And this goes for individuals that are employed by someone as well, executives that are looking at the next stage of their life where they become what I call FIP, not VIP, but FIP, financially independent person. So a financially independent person is what you want to be so you can go on to the next stage of your development and your apportation to society and to the world. It's not retirement. I really dislike the word retirement. I think it should be redefined, and I offer that up. FIP, financially independent person. That's what I want to become. So having
Yes.
that consultant, that accountant, that attorney, they're essential.
Mhm.
And here's one thing that a consultant will do. For instance, I had one individual selling his business, and I said, "How much money do you owe?" And he says, "I owe about $2.5 million." And I said, "Okay. When you negotiate with your M&A company, the mergers and acquisition company, they're going to want a percentage of all of the deal. Guess what that includes? Your debt. Let's try to work on those numbers and save you some money. Why would I want to pay a mergers and acquisition person 6%, 7%, or whatever on my debt just because the person that's buying or the organization that's buying my business is looking at the total number of the sale. So if I sell your business for $50 million, guess what? $2.5 million of that is debt that's going to be paid out. You make nothing, you see.
Tony, I
Mhm.
think what you're talking about is just crucial. I have to just comment on it because a lot of times, and you mentioned it, the consultant might be brought in late. And as a result, some aspects of the valuation may have already been messed up or missed a little bit. And they may have made some mistakes in what they've agreed to because they didn't even know what they could do or even how much the business could be worth if they had had someone who was also looking out for their best interests.
And here's another benefit of hiring on the next step, the M&A company. They guide you. They give you and your consultant some ideas. Hey, this is the kind of buyer base that's out there for your business at this time. And you might not be ready to sell, but that information is crucial and it's kept close to the breast when it comes to M&A. But they can educate you about these things and they watch for you. If a buyer is saying, hey, I'm looking for a business, well, Tony has a business over here. He might be wanting to sell. And that's one thing that I'd like to get into is when to sell, because it's very essential for the person to understand that, when to sell or when to get out. And that has to do with FIP.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you talked about that too a little bit last time, and a person having the number in their mind about how much they want to be receiving after the sale and how much the business has to get to in order for that to happen. Thing
In
is
passive income, yes.
passive income, and yes, and really creating the freedom, if you will, for that owner in the sales process. But let me ask you something else before we get to even what else you might want to add there. You also mentioned that this M&A team is for businesses that are 5 million and above. And what if a business is smaller? How does a business broker function for a smaller business is different from an M&A team?
Yeah, business brokers are more like real estate brokers. If I had to compare them to anyone else, a real estate broker will do a comparative market analysis to tell you, your business, your house type and size and location is selling for about this much. So you should go with that. There's no blue sky. There's no pro forma. There's simply the market holds this. You see, M&A is looking at blue sky and it's going to get money for that. And it requires a performance. So those are two things that are very essential for you if you're going to sell with a business broker, to have your consultant inculc into that business broker to say, hey, I want the audience out there to know this is the kind of money that I can make. And I want that in my book. Now you're going to create a book, and that voluminous document should have everything about the business. And part of that is blue sky. This is where I think the business is going to go. And this is how much I think the business is going to make. And here's the pro forma that shows that. And here's how I can justify that pro forma. Business brokers, they don't do all that kind of thing, in my experience. There might be some out there that know to do this. When it comes to businesses that are above $5 million, you're going to be paying them $40,000, $70,000 to just come up with valuation. Well, businesses that are in the 100,000, half a million, 1 million, you don't want to pay $70,000 for valuation. It takes a big chunk out of it. M&A percentages obviously will be smaller percentage because it's a bigger number, but business brokers get a good amount for what they do. Taking lessons from Businesses that sell for more is important to apply for businesses that sell for less. But you're left to your own endeavors if you don't have people that are educated like a consultant that can, even if the consultant doesn't know about these things, can go out and find it for you and put the right people in front of you.
So you might be leaving money on the table if you don't really have the right team members around you, is what I hear you saying. Tony, I want to go
Absolutely.
deeper on something else too that you covered last time, but we didn't get a chance to go into it in a real deep way because one of the pieces of the value of the business that's really important are the employees, the personnel who work in the company. And you have a concept that you call parallelism, and you have this ladder approach to hiring so that you end up having the best people in the business and you're not holding on to the wrong people for too long. So I want us to talk about that since the people are such an important part of the value. So tell us more about this parallelism and the ladder.
So those are two different things. Parallelism has to do with different stages in your life as you're growing and working. Your interests will change and your business interests will change. And because you have this one business, you're going down this path. And as you're going down this path, different opportunities will be presented to you. There's a line that you're following with this business, and there's an end to that. So just think of a line, and there's a beginning and an end. During your development in business, you want to prepare for the next stage, the next step, the next thing, the what if. What if this goes bankrupt? What if this is not what I really want? For whatever reason, family, health, anything, this will end and you have nothing else if you don't create another line that runs parallel to this one. So in my business development, that's why being a serial entrepreneur is literally that. You're doing more than just one thing, but not right away. 5 years down the road, you might come up with something else that's wow, you know. In my experience, it was while I was doing my Air Force job as a jet engine mechanic. Let's go down there, way early. I was in my 20s. I opened a motorcycle shop and I was working that motorcycle shop after I left my Air Force job. That motorcycle shop gave me more money. It's more than a gig, a side gig. It's more than that. It is a true business that I started and I wanted to sell that business. Of course, I was in my 20s, so I didn't know everything I know today about those things. So all I did was give my list of customers I used to do tune-ups to, and on their motorcycles, and I gave them to this one guy, and he said, "Hey, why don't you keep that bike? Thanks for all the help you've given me." And he gave me a motorcycle. so, so I guess I did sell my first business, and I got a motorcycle. But then when I became an officer in the Air Force, I was doing space stuff and acquisition after that. I was running a little side business of a martial arts school, and I would teach martial arts in the evening. So, and then I started the real estate thing. I was doing real estate 5 years before I retired. I concentrated on the military personnel. That's kind of precarious when you're active duty. You have to get permission and all that from your commanding officer and keep real good documentation. That is the estimate of parallelism, where this will stop. My Air Force career stopped and real estate continued. Martial arts continued. I sold my martial arts business. Today, they're still in business. They have three of the same type of school, and it's grown. So parallelism is that parallel lines on things that you are interested in. It's a matter of being willing and able to grow without just a step. I first do this, then I will do this, then I will do that. I consider that boring, to say the least.
Well, as an entrepreneur, you would say that, of course, because you would like a little more dynamic action. What I hear and what you're saying is reminds me of a relay race because when you're in a relay, you're passing the baton to the next leg, if you will. It's not like there's nothingness out there. There's something that is coming alongside in parallel that you are doing and can do at a greater level later when you have the opportunity. And so I kind of like this concept where you're building opportunity for yourself all at the same time for now and for the future. And I think that even your concept of this ladder is similar on the hiring side. So talk about that.
I truly appreciate that analogy of the relay race because you put a slower racer on a particular position so you can take advantage of the timing and all that. Just like in parallelism, you don't actually have to dedicate all of your time to this one thing. It's only a portion of your time, and you'll grow into it, and you have time to grow into it because you have the financial wherewithal to do that. The relay race analogy is very good, but the latter effect ends up being like parallelism when hiring employees in this way. If an employee comes to you and says, "Hey, I'd like a job. Here's all my qualifications," share the mission with them, share your vision with them, and then make sure they have the same culture as you do. Okay. So you hire them. Well, guess what? That employee is good for 2 years, maybe 5. What do? Do you just have one position? That person leaves in 2 years and you're in trouble. Okay, your business slows down, whatever. So, how about hiring somebody else that will learn from this employee a year down the road and you're paralleling their position in the event this person does leave? These two people will allow your business grow because you have two, they can do more. And you're requiring them to do more. Of course, there's a wage expense. There's all sorts of liabilities getting more people, especially when you're in the hundreds. But paralleling positions is something that is essential in order to ensure that your business continuity is maintained, especially for those businesses under $10 million. They are very centric with the people that are running their business, and they rely on these people a lot. And I don't believe just keeping employees because the employee spends a lot, has 2 houses and 2 ex-wives, he can't afford to leave, that's not a good reason to not do this parallelism. Yeah, it's hiring with the expectation of employees leaving, and you're wanting to solidify that business continuity.
I think you're doing several things. You're solidifying the business continuity so one person doesn't leave and destroy the business because there were no redundancies in place. And you also are having alternatives available in case someone is not working out and you don't have to be stuck with them for too long because you've already got somebody in the wings who's been trained up in that and can step into that role, and you'll bring somebody in alongside them as well. So it keeps the company valuable the whole time so that whenever you're ready for the valuation, people can see that you've got this parallelism in the hiring in place as well. So I think that's really a brilliant idea and a brilliant strategy. And I'm sure that a lot of small business owners might even complain about it in terms of the expense and the cost, yet the cost to not do it is even greater.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't like being put up against the wall by an employee
Yeah.
where they come to you and they say, "I'm going to leave if you don't give me this much, if you
Hmm.
don't make these concessions, which cost the business money." I don't like that to be in that position. and you'll be placed in that position no matter what. But the answer ends up being much easier for that CEO or hiring director or division manager or whatever when he does have this parallel environment. If you're not here, well, somebody else will do it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Sure.
Hi, it's Dr. Karen here, and I hope that you are enjoying today's show. Just wanted to drop in to remind you that succession is an intentional process. So remember to contact me to figure out how best to create that culture of development so that you have a successor when you're ready to leave and go to the next step in your life. You can reach me at Dr. Dr. Karen, Karen at transleadership.com. Now enjoy the rest of the show. Tony, let me ask you too, because I know with Fortune 500 kinds of companies, and there are a lot of exits that happen there, businesses get sold and so on. And we've been talking about how that the people are really important, how important the culture is. And what I've seen is they'll do well on the numbers part of the valuation. They'll do well on why they think these two businesses might do well coming together if it's a merger and acquisition, or even why the acquirer wants to purchase it, even if it's not an M&A. And then what really interests me as how frequently they'll botch up the people and culture part because of not thinking about it ahead of time. If it's an M&A, will these two entities truly merge? Will those cultures live well together, so to speak, and so on? So I want you to talk a little bit about that aspect, especially for the big business. What do they have to do more of to pay attention to the people and culture part so that maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, we hear that this thing failed?
When you hire an M&A, they have to share your culture. If they're just by the numbers, don't hire them. If the owners of the business come to you and they say, "Yeah, we're the greatest M&A place in the world," and suddenly you hire them and they pass you off to an assistant without telling you that that's the way they do business, yeah, fire them. They have to share your culture, and they have to share your expectations of how much effort they're going to put into learning your business, because you've spent so many years building this beauty of a structure, an entity that emulates your desires, and you put your heart and soul into this thing, and your employees emulate what you want because they share your culture. And suddenly you're going to sell it, and it becomes a number, and that's it. I'm a great believer in that. To you, the number is essential, but to the M&A guy, he has to share your enthusiasm. He has to share your like for that business, for the possibility of that business not going just 10 years, but 20 years, 30 years, you see. He has to have that. If it's just a number to him, don't hire that MA. And I said something a while ago. It's a number, right? It truly is just a number. At the end of the day, you want that number. You want that valuation. You want that to happen. But it's not going to happen to meet your expectations if the people representing you don't share your culture, don't share your vision, don't share your mission. You see, at the end of the day, you're selling it. So yeah, when I sold it, don't care about that anymore. I'm going over to do something else. That's true. But while you're exiting, it's 2, 3 years. You got to keep doing your job, and you have to deal with M&A and your team. That's why having this team early on is really good, because they're already fitting in your business. But and all you're doing is flipping a switch and saying, "Hey, it's time. I met my goals. I met my number and my time. Let's do it." And now you have to continue to build your business and prove that EBITDA is there and it's going to grow. And you have 2 or 3 years to do that.
So I think a lot of times, maybe with the big boys, the big companies, the Fortune 500s, they're, like I said, they do well on the numbers part of it. They may not, maybe they're bringing in the M&A people because of the opportunity of a sale, and they haven't been there all along to really understand the nuances of the culture. But what I find is often there's a culture clash. And that's when I often come into the big companies, is because these cultures are not getting along, they're not meshing. And in many cases, they're not going to mesh. They just aren't, because nobody thought about, do they
Oh, sure.
have enough similarity in the culture and who they are to work together and to walk together? It's like marrying somebody who's totally a terrible fit for you, and the marriage might not last very long as a result. And so I think it is important to think about that when you consider how much time, energy, money is invested in these deals. To have it last for less than 2 or 3 years, that's not a good thing.
There you go with a very good analogy when it comes to marrying somebody that you really don't know how to please or what they're like because you're too young, let's say. But if you did know how to handle that person or how to handle the relationship, you would have made a great team. So, knowing these parts ahead of time, you're educated and you build this team ahead of time. They know you, you know them. When you flip that switch, it's seamless. So, there's no question about it. In fact, they should come to you and say, by the way, you met your goals. Are you changing them? Because every plan can change. That's what a plan is. Every schedule will change. I tell people there's two things I want you to do. I want you to give me a number and a day. How long and the number. How long do you want to keep this business? Is that going to be the main reason you get out of it? It's time. Or if it's not, is it 50% or 30% of your decision? And then give me a number. What is the income that you need passively for the rest of your life? And once I have those two things, I can work EBITDA backwards.
Mhm.
I can tell you what it is that you should be selling your business for. And I can estimate about when that's going to happen.
Mhm.
If you have a team early, you're ahead of the game. You're way ahead of the game. You have your consultant sitting there on occasion, just poking at you. How about this? How about that? You said this. Did you change your mind? Have you grown? Have things changed in your life that make you want to do something different? Is there some other impetus that has arisen that would change your mind for these things? It's something great to have.
Yeah, and there's some people, including in a business context, that you would choose not to marry because there's not a values fit. You got one person with think is unscrupulous and willing to do all kinds of stuff to make a buck, and then the other person has real high ethics and morals, and they don't fit. They don't fit together in a sense. And so just being able to even figure that out when it's a merger, it's especially that's really, really important. And if you expect that
Mhm.
company to continue with those people, that becomes important. So, Tony, I want to dial back to something else, because last time we were talking about when do you inform people of this acquisition? And you were very clear that you don't inform people until after it's done. And of course, lots of things happen before it's really done, and it looks like it's not going to get done, and on and on and on. Okay, so finally, the deal is done. Now you're informing people. So I want you to think about several audiences. You have the employees in the company, you might have vendors and suppliers, you might have subcontractors, you have customers, other kinds of stakeholders. So are you informing, would you suggest informing everyone pretty much at the exact same time, the employees and in-house people a day earlier? What's the messaging that goes to these diverse groups? What would you say?
As to your previous statement and this answer to this question, I believe in balance. I believe that disagreements are healthy in business, and non-attribution is essential in business. boy, I would have never made it out of a board meeting if they didn't let me just say what I wanted to say. If I had to tiptoe around people, I would have never made it out of the military. I'll tell you. One of my bosses said to me after 9/11, I said, I have to get back into government work. This is New York. I'm a New Yorker. I got to do this. I'm doing paintball of all things. I'm designing stuff for shooting paintballs. You know, and he says, Tony, are you ready to subjugate yourself again? I told him, I never subjugated myself in the military. He goes, yeah, that was a problem. That was, and this is a former commander of mine. Yeah, that was a problem, Tony. And I was young, and I'd speak my mind. And in business, you have to have that. You have to invite that. Same thing, and as you're exiting, you have to invite the discourse and say, these people sometimes don't want to be fired, and they don't want to tell you what they really should be telling you. And one of those things is, hey, should I inform these people about what's going on? And most M&As will tell you no, that I've ever come across. They'll tell you no. Of course, there are some key personnel that you would. It's obvious. It's going to cost you money when you tell them that, by the way. If you don't have this parallel step thing and you tell them 3 years out that, hey, I'm selling, and they go, I'm not going to be around for that. Okay. And they may leave earlier. So you must be very careful. That's something to take on with one-on-one with your consultant and really say, how about that position? How about this position? Can I afford to lose that person? Because part of your valuation is going to be the value of your people. What if that person leaves? Or what if both of these people that I have are working on these parallel positioning, I should say, what if they both leave? So those are conversations to have. So be very diligent, very careful with that decision. Generally speaking, no, you don't tell them. No, they're business. I'll give you a story. Paintball. I'm selling the paintball business, and one of my employees says, how could you do this to me? I won't have a job. You're selling the business. And I said, well, I didn't build this business just for you. He went about very, very emotional, saying, they're not going to want me in this business. And I'll reserve the reason why, because it's quite personal. Once they see me, they will not want me in their business. Will think I'm capable. You can imagine the conversation we had. That was a lesson learned. Don't tell them. Don't tell them.
You got to deal with drama at the wrong time.
If you multiply it into big business, it doesn't matter that these are executives that make $1.5 million a year in bonuses and everything, and it doesn't matter. They're still people. They're emotional, and they may take it on, going, how could that happen? It doesn't matter how much money they make. It depends on what kind of personality they are. And you may lose them early, and that'll hurt your business. And then you might have to extend this M&A out.
Another thing that I think is important is about the timing, is because by the time you make the decision and now you can announce it, you can also announce things in such a way that people see the value in remaining with the business. I think sometimes when word gets out too early, then people don't know what is the advantage to being there. And because they may not be so entrepreneurial in their own mindset and can't think of it, then they might exit sooner. So, to that point, what are some of the messages that really should be shared when you share? What should people be told? What should they know about?
I think honesty is always the best policy. I build a business with a particular culture that everyone shares. I strive to hire people that share that culture. So It's easier to discuss things in an honest and open way. And it's basic. It is time for me. This is my path. I have created a path for myself that has been met, and it's time to move to the next stage. And I hope you understand that what I've done is tried to protect the business with this sale as well. With my business, it was merged into Asylum. With Combat Training Solutions, the name CTS went away. And CTS was very well known amongst militaries. Heck, we were in 16 countries, military of 16 countries, and police of those countries. So not just military, but civilian. And that name went away. That was devastating for a lot of my customers. Who do I talk to? Who are they? So yeah, emotions. But the employees, they were all supportive of me, applauding me, and thanking me for the careers that I had built for them. And if it worked out that they couldn't do what the company wanted, oh well, they'll do something else. In fact, in my business, I'm not saying too much in this, but not one factory worker moved. They were so happy. They were happy for me. I'm talking about the line worker that was doing a WIP, a work in progress, a part of this big thing. And they were, oh, Tony, it's great that you're doing this. But then I ran my business knowing that. One time I had well over 300 employees that I knew every single one of them, and I'd touch them on the shoulder. How are you doing today?
Mm-hmm.
I was that kind of guy,
Yeah.
And sometimes as the CEO, you simply don't have that time.
Mm-hmm.
But as much as you can, you should, especially with your senior staff. Of course, you know them and all that, but your senior staff can revolt. You have to be very careful because, again, just because you say I'm going to sell doesn't mean it's going to happen. It might be 5 years. Of course, again, that's if you start late with these things. If you
Exactly.
start early, it'll happen quickly, quicker. It might
At the
not
right
take 2 years,
time.
might not take 3 years. It might be quick because your M&A might have that buyer already and whisper in his ear, hey, remember that business I told you about that you've been watching for these many years, that you've been wanting to invest in as a venture capitalist, or as an angel,
Mm-hmm.
it's coming available and it'll happen. And the books are done, the valuation's done, you preempt as much as you can. And one of the things that you preempt is that employee's attitude
Mm-hmm.
towards you not being there anymore. And you do
Well,
that in subtle ways.
you talked about seeding it all along the way and from the beginning so that they know and that they're aware of it. But let me ask you this, and this is an important question. Let's say you do everything right, all the stuff we've been talking about last segment and this segment, and yet some unexpected thing happens as part of the sale or whatever, or what happens after the sale, some nightmare emerges. Talk a little bit about some nightmares you've seen and what can people do proactively, even to be ready and prepare for the unexpected.
Terms are important, right? Any contract, it sounds very basic and even stupid to mention it. Of course, terms matter. But what if they don't follow the terms? Consequences have to be in the contract. If you don't do this, then this happens. And you gotta negotiate that. The consequences for not following the terms. And if they're in bold and black and white, you will get your way. And those defined consequences may prevent the people, whoever they are, from violating the terms of your agreement. When they violate the terms, they may be looking at how much money you have in order to fight them. You can't fight us. We're big. We have a lot of money. We can afford our attorney. One of the things that I recommend that you always do is you have a good amount of money set aside in that attorney's trust account to handle the hopefully uneventful time where someone violates the terms of your sale. So you have the money to fight. And that comes to a shock to some people when they're not wanting to follow their terms because the higher ups changed their mind or they hired some other CEO to do whatever with the business, and the CEO decides, I don't want to be in that business. But you just bought that business. I don't want to follow those terms. And suddenly you're left in a lurch. If you don't have consequences written down, yeah, you're going to be left in a lurch. It's another reason why you pick a team that knows what the heck they're doing and they have enough time to do it. So a consultant is very important for that. Consultant, while this offer is coming through and being negotiated. And by the way, the sale of a business, it's said in M&A, business sales fail 5 times before they ever close. That's a term. And it's true because there's personalities involved, you know. But if you have your ducks in a row early on, those 5 maybe come up to 2, you know. Having this preemptive impact with your consultant and your M&A guy and your attorney, telling your attorney, make sure that when you write this up, you have a consequence for each one of those terms not being followed. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And it's in bold.
Because a lot of people, they wouldn't think about the consequences. They'll think about the terms in the contract. And they wouldn't think that something's going to go wrong. These look like decent people. Everything looks great. You're not thinking that something's going to happen where you might have to go to court over to whatever, where you might have to have money set aside. So I think that this is extremely wise counsel, and people might not hear this from very many individuals.
Exactly. The one thing that I have experienced is that if you have an individual come into the business that bought you and doesn't share, for whatever reason, the vision that the previous CEO or director of the board or whomever had, and suddenly it impacts your sales agreement, you're left with negotiating again. And I'm not here to negotiate with you. I'm here to enact the agreements that we have had, especially if you're staying with the business. Most of the time, when you sell a business, you have to stay with the business for a period of time if you want to maximize the amount of money you get out of it. If you would just want to sell and punch, you're going to get less money than if you sell and stay for a little bit to prove your muster, to prove your story, to prove your blue sky, your pro forma, you see? And you'll make more money. But in that time, personnel change, and suddenly you're left renegotiating what you already negotiated. Not so much if you have consequences written down. They'll think twice. They'll think twice. Now, be careful that the consequence is not so, the Spanish word is leve. It's weak. The consequence is so weak that they go, I can live with that. You see? Well, and they have to agree with it. They may say, that's a bit overboard. Are you planning on violating this term? Is that what I'm hearing? Let's talk straight here. It may bring other things up. Yes. It might mean that you might get some insight as to what's going to happen in the future. So this tactic is one that I use and I recommend that everyone use. So we're straight up front. This is what's going to happen. You're not going to violate it. And if you do, that thing's going to hit.
That's great.
Okay. And it might hurt.
Thank you so much, Tony, for sharing what you shared today, and particularly that last part, because I know that not everybody's going to get that advice and counsel. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And so, how can people get a hold of you? Tell us that.
Main email, it's cc@colonfam.com. So COLONFAM.com. cc@colonfam.com.
And what additional words of wisdom do you want to leave for my community, especially of corporate executives? And there's some entrepreneurs listening too. So, would you like to say?
Do everything in good measure and adjust to situation. In itself is the discussion of balance that you should have when creating and pursuing the history of your business. I believe the story should be built first and then carried out so you can make the story real. And of course, you're going to change down the road, but you have to preempt the history of your business. So do everything in good measure and adjust to situation, and you will be successful.
There you have it. Thank you so much, Tony. And as we close today, I want to share some verses that come from Luke, the 14th chapter. And this is verses 28 and 29. And this is Jesus speaking, and he says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him." I think that everything that we've been talking about is planning ahead, counting the cost as you are building your tower, which is your business, and building your exit for that business so that you build everything in that you possibly can so that the tower really does get built the way you want it to be built, and it's not standing there as a half structure and people wondering, I wonder what happened to them. So I hope you take heed to what Tony has shared with us today and build your exit in a profitable way. Have a great day. Hi, this is Dr. Karen, and today I'm here with Terrence Chapman, who is the president and CEO of Victorious Family and also the author of Do Your Children Believe? Victorious Family has a goal of reaching 9.2 million families by 2030. Terrence, tell us, how far along are you on that goal?
Well, we're very excited. Last year, for example, we reached 133,800 families, and prior to that, so we're right on around the 400,000 family mark towards our 9.2 million goal in the second year, really in a year and a half. So we're extremely excited.
That is very, very exciting news. And I know that it's many new initiatives that help you to reach even more families. So tell us what's new in the ministry.
You know, what's exciting in December 7th of 2023, we had a national newspaper cover Victoria's Family, and it went throughout the country. And that has exposed us to over 30 million families in the US. From that, we've got a great deal of responses. And one of those responses is a new partnership that we're forming with Hampton University to come alongside of them and work in 8 counties in the Hampton Roads area. So we're real excited about that. Millions of families will be exposed to what does it look like to have family transformation taking place in their home.
That's phenomenal. So, how can people reach you and how can they reach your weekly resource that you have as well?
Well, they can reach us at victoriousfamily.org, victoriousfamily.org. Our resources are there, and we're excited because we have a brand new resource that just came out. It's our weekly rhythms guide. It really gives the parent and individual kind of a day-to-day rhythm and how they might walk in Christ. And so we really would encourage that they get a copy of our weekly rhythms guide for parents and individuals.
Thank you so much, Terrence. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. And to you out there in the audience, please go to victoriousfamily.org, donate to the ministry, get the weekly rhythms guide, and see what else is new in the ministry. See you next time. You've been listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. And I want to give a special thanks to jazz saxophonist Ron McMillan for granting us permission to use his gifted music on our show. Thanks for listening, and remember to go to my website, transleadership.com, for more strategies, insights, and leadership resources.